The nerve impulse is an electric current that travels from dendrites through the axon to the next nerve. Before going into detail, the general purpose of a nerve impulse is: the nerve is in a resting state, a threshold stimulus applied, the cell membrane depolarizes, the cell membrane repolarizes, the adjacent area undergoes the same process, the process moves along like a wave, resting state reestablishes, and then the all or nothing principle is in effect. The nerve will remain in a resting state until the threshold stimulus is applied. In the resting state, the cell membrane is polarized. This has to do with an important molecule called the sodium-potassium pump. This molecule pumps sodium ions from the inside of the neuron to the outside and potassium ions from the outside to the inside because of the sodium's inability to diffuse across the cell membrane. The action of the sodium-potassium pump causes a high concentration of sodium outside the cell and a high concentration of potassium inside the cell. The sodium and potassium being separated create two different poles of ions on each side of the membrane. This is why it's called polarization. The differences in charges on each side of the membrane is referred to as the resting membrane potential. The change from the resting state occurs once a threshold stimulus is applied. The threshold stimulus is a stimulus strong enough to cause a depolarization of the cell membrane. The sodium-potassium channel, a special molecular structure, opens at the point on the nerve where the stimulus occurred. The high concentration of sodium ions outside the cell cause them to flow through the channel in a process called passive diffusion. The ions also move because of the differences in charge on each side of the membrane. The inside of the cell membrane is then changed from a positive charge to a negative charge. This is referred to as the action potential.
The process of repolarization occurs nearly a fraction a second after the sodium ion begins to flow out. The sodium channel snaps shut almost immediately. The next part of repolarization occurs when the potassium channel is open, causing the potassium ions to passively diffuse out of the cell due to the difference in concentration and charge on the other side of the membrane. The sodium and potassium ions returning to the opposite sides of the membrane restores the negative charge inside the cell of the resting state. One final important aspect of the nerve impulse to keep in mind is the all or nothing principle. This principle basically states that all nerve impulses will occur in the exact same way and will always result in the completion of depolarization and repolarization. Basically, as long as the threshold stimulus is applied, a complete cycle will occur. It either happens completely or doesn't happen at all.